आगे सबको मैं कॉन्ट्रैक्ट दिलाऊंगा सरकारी, उसमें से मैं पैसे गबन करूंगा। टीचर्स अपॉइंटमेंट में मैं रिश्वत लूंगा। Mr. Om Prakash Chautala is in jail in Haryana because they say 3,000 crores of money were disappeared because he was manipulating the appointment of primary school teachers, which is the most vicious thing to do because बच्चों का दिमाग खराब करना। If you are appointing corrupt primary school teachers, you can imagine what is going to happen to the next generation. So when this kind of bhayankar money is being spent in elections, it is definitely going to lead to bad governance. It's like QED, A implies B, भ्रष्ट चुनाव तो भ्रष्ट सरकार। मतलब इसमें कोई संदेह ही नहीं है। आप don't even have to worry about it. It's bound to happen. No, this is where we are. Now, why is it happening? We can discuss a little bit. But one of the reasons is that the voter awareness in large parts of the country is very different from what you and I sitting in these kind of places think. People in rural areas and slums, I have a lot of respect for them by the way, because they really struggle to survive and do a lot of hard work. Their thinking of elections is very, very different. They vote on the basis of caste, they vote on the basis of money, they vote on religion, all sorts of reasons are there. And all these issues that we are concerned about, some of them may or may not be worried about. And the inequality in our society is one of the highest in the world. Yesterday's paper had a front page news that India has the 6th largest number of billionaires in the world. But India also has the largest number of malnourished children. India also has the largest number of people below the poverty line. No country in the world has as many people below the poverty line, whichever way you count it, as India. Because China is way ahead of us and no other country has this kind of population. Now, this kind of extreme inequality is unsustainable. And so therefore, लोगों को पैसा दो, vote खरीदो. So this is definitely happening. So these are some of the issues that we came up with. So the only thing we have been able to achieve is bring out this information. I think voter awareness is there, and do this analysis and see that we are back to square one. In spite of the information coming out, things are not really changing that much. Let me close in the next 5 minutes with some positive news. Apart from the election watch and dissemination, we do 2 other things. One is, wherever appropriate, we of course go to the courts and to the Central Information Commission. And in the last 6 months, you would have seen a series of Supreme Court judgments and Central Information Commission rulings. So the political parties are now under the right to information, which means any one of you can ask questions about any aspect of the political party and they are obliged to tell you about it. The second thing is that convicted MPs and MLAs are going to be disqualified. I'm not going to be, they have been disqualified. The Supreme Court has already laid down. That was another PI. Then they are saying that you have an option to vote for none of the above now. If you don't like any of the candidates, you can vote for none of the above. And so on. So there have been a series of judgments all in the last 6 months. So the political parties are now under a little bit of retreat and they are trying to get their act together. And both the major parties, the BJP and the Congress, have been making public statements that people with severely tainted records would not be given tickets. Whether they will follow it or not, we don't know, but at least they are being forced to say that because so much of information is now coming up. And certainly along with our work, I think the Right to Information Act has played a huge role in some of these developments. So that I think is a bit of positive news. We also do a third kind of work. Apart from going to the courts and going to the people, we also do advocacy with the Election Commission, with the Standing Committee of Parliament, wherever possible with the political parties themselves. So just to give you an instance of a few of these kind of advocacy kind of work we do, we were invited by the Parliamentary Committee on Ethics. See, they wanted to introduce a code of conduct for members of Parliament in Lok Sabha. And we gave them a set of recommendations. It's there on the website of the Lok Sabha. So on the very first page, they are saying that this is the recommendations of ADR, and more or less in total they have accepted those recommendations as the code of conduct for MPs. But this is the committee's recommendation to the House through the Speaker. The House is yet to adopt it. So this is just an instance. We keep on, wherever we get a window, we keep pushing for improvement behind the scenes. And last point I'll try to make is that since you guys are all extremely bright, you have all cracked at JEE and you're all sitting here in IIT Kanpur, I will invite you to think about the systems that are in place, and maybe you will, as you gain depth and more interest and wisdom, you will come up with good ideas on that. See, there are 4 systems in the world basically on elections. One is the Indian system. Whoever gets the maximum number of votes wins. It is the same as the British system. And the members of parliament indirectly elect the prime minister. The MLAs indirectly elect the chief minister. In contrast, you have the American system where the president and the governor of each state is directly elected by the different system. Then you have the European system, which is there in 21 out of 28 European countries, called the proportional representative system, which they try to correct for the number of votes a political party gets. So just to drive home the point, since 1950 to now, in every election, the Indian National Congress has always got more votes than the Bharatiya Janata Party. Even when the Bharatiya Janata Party won in 98 and 99, the Congress actually got more votes. That's because the Congress is evenly and thinly spread all over the country, where the BJP in pockets is able to win some seats. So if you're number 2 everywhere, you still don't get so many seats. So to correct for the anomaly, in Europe they have the proportional representative system, where some proportion of the seats in accordance with some formula would be given to a party based on the number of votes it got. And then the last system is the French system, where they say to be a people's representative, you must have at least 50% of the vote. So if nobody gets 50% of the vote, they have a runoff election between the top 2 candidates. And whoever gets the maximum then becomes a winner. And if there are only 2 candidates, one of them will get at least 50% of the votes cast. So several law commissions, constitutional review committees set up by the government have gone into these in great detail and given a whole lot of recommendations on what kind of systems we should have. And you can read them, but I'll just close by giving you what problems each one tries to address. So if you want a strong, stable government, which seems to be the cry today, although I'm not sure that short-term wisdom is always the best thing, then certainly the American system works, which is you directly elect the CM or you directly elect the president or the prime minister of the country. And so once that person is elected, he or she will appoint professionals to manage finance and industry and commerce, and you will have a sort of a presidential kind of system. The great danger of this, people say, is that in such a diverse country like India, with so many languages, so many castes, so many religions and so many regions, and everybody wanting to break up from Telangana to Rohilkhand to Bundelkhand, everybody wants to quit state. If you force a uniform CM or this thing, there will be more and more trouble, is what some people feel. Then what does the German system or the European system that I've already told you, it tries to correct for the fact that some parties are getting less seats than votes. They get more votes but less seats, so some formula is worked out to adjust for that. And the French system, what it tries to do is that how can you call yourself a people's representative unless you have 50% of the vote? Now Uttar Pradesh is a field I've seen on TV, some of you would have seen, where many of the candidates were giving openly casteist or communal speeches. मैं उसका हाथ काट दूंगा, मैं उसका पैर काट दूंगा. You must have seen all these speeches on TV. Now, if this candidate has to go for a second round and get 50% of the votes, he will not talk like this. So some people argue, and including the Constitutional Review Committee, that the great need of the country today is unity. We have enough differences, but we need a system that will incentivize unified behavior. And if somebody has to campaign ultimately seeking at least 50% of the vote. Firstly, you won't be able to buy 50% of the vote. Right now, with 30% of the vote, you can win. उसमें से 20-25% तो कहीं नहीं गए, क्योंकि मेरे जात के लोग वोट करेंगे, तो 5% को मुझे खरीदना है, तो उनको पैसे बांटो, दारू वारू पिलाओ और टिकट खरीदो। मगर 50% वोट लेने हैं तो कहाँ से मिलेगा? It will be very difficult. The second thing is, apart from money power, the nature of politics and campaigns will change, where it has to be more inclusive. So that's what some people have recommended. We are also trying to push for those changes, but they will require constitutional amendments. And the political party system also has to change. I think we should be very, very clear about this. In Germany, the constitution says a party that is internally autocratic cannot be expected to function democratically if voted to power. Such a party has no, will not be allowed to rule Germany. It's there in the constitution. They put it in after the bitter experience of Adolf Hitler, who was democratically elected by them. So they said a party must be internally democratic in the constitution. Many other countries have laws, not a constitution provision, but a legal provision that they should be democratic. Which party in India is democratic? So there must be term limits. You can be president of the party for 1, 2, 3 terms. There must be transparency in the accounts, candidate selection, party office bearer selection, all must be done in a democratic way. So these are some other ideas that we need to think about. So let me close with one thing. I used to be last 3-4 years very despondent and cynical that nothing will happen. But that old film, Lagera Munna Bhai, if you keep at it, somewhere things start changing. So we got 6 judgments from the Supreme Court in the last 6 months. And I think if there is enough public opinion, every voice counts, particularly voice of educated people like you counts much more. And we say that we will not stand for this. This is what we feel should be done. You have your internet, your Google, your Facebook, you can send emails to your MPs and MLA. I think if we build some positive, constructive voice for positive change, eventually things will change. So that's all I have to say, and I'm sorry if I was
Before you haven't extended your time at all. For benefit of all the others, you just say a word about who you are, then kind of.
Yeah, I am Sarvesh Chandran. I am the department here. Just want to know what is your opinion about state funding of elections?
Yes.
And how the right to recall will help us?
I think very, very important and pertinent questions. See, I can give you my opinion, but in a great country like India with 1.2 billion people, we need to evolve a consensus on this. We do surveys periodically, and people are split down the middle 50-50. 50% approximately saying we need state funding and 50% being totally opposed to it. On balance, since you asked my opinion, I am very much in favor of state funding. State funding, if it is implemented properly, will help to reduce the menace of black monies. I think that's where you are coming from. And I will quote one very wonderful story I heard. When Nelson Mandela, one of the great men who is still alive today, when he first became, President of South Africa, this question came up: how do you fund elections? So he called a big international conference, and people and experts from all over the world came. And there were lots of opinions expressed on whether we should have state funding or not, and if we don't have state funding, there should be transparency, limits, all sorts of details were discussed. So Nelson Mandela was sitting quiet. At the end, he rose to speak, and he asked a simple question: are elections for private purpose or public purpose? What do you say? Public purpose. He says, then the public shall fund it. So he was very much in favor of public funding. I think it's truly democratic, but there is lots of opposition to that. Now on the right to reject, one is right to recall and one is right to reject. I don't know what your question was about. Right to recall is a much more complicated thing. I mean, personally, I'm not in favor of it, if you are asking me. But in Madhya Pradesh and in some of the other states, at the local panchayat elections, they have given the right to recall. So there is a process laid down. So it is only for sarpanch, Zilla Parishad, municipal elections, etc. So initially a certain number of people have to propose, it is then voted in the council, and once some 2/3 majority is there, then it is referred to the public. So ऐसे नहीं कि किसी ने वो कर दिया कि भाई कोई धोबी आके भगवान राम को बोले तो सीता को हमने जंगल में भेज दिया, उस टाइप का नहीं है. There has to be a process for rejecting, and it has worked there. But if you take, see, the country is so suspicious, the lack of trust is so high that we will be perpetually fighting battles for right to recall. You know, सब लोग चोर हैं, मेरे अलावा तो सब चोर हैं ना. हिंदुस्तान में एक ही नहीं किसान है, वो तो मैं हूँ, बाकी सब चोर हैं. Everybody thinks like that. So right to recall ही चलता रहेगा. So I am little scared of that. See, unless we build a healthy, trusting society where we trust each other, it is going to lead to a lot of. I mean, this is my personal opinion, but. Yes, yes.
Sir, you mentioned about the Constitutional Review Committee. So, sir, some of the recommendations that you said, like removing the first or the post system or introducing the friend system, so they are very radical in nature. So, like bringing it throughout the country. So, and what is the status of the discussion going on? Because we are not aware of.
No, see, these India from, I'll tell you on electoral and political reforms. You had the Goswami Committee report, you had the N.I. Boran report on criminalization of politics, you have the Law Commission, you have the Constitutional Review Committee, you have the Election Commission recommendation, the second Administrative Reforms Commission. Now they set up another commission. The fact when they set up a new commission means that उनको कुछ नहीं करना है. So there is enough wisdom, believe me, if you read those reports, very wise and sane people and very respected scholarly people have written, the judges have written very nice reports. The government is in no mood to implement it. That is a problem. But I'll say one thing. When we start building pressure, they will do it. So do something. Don't think that my voice will be lost in the wilderness. Do something. Yes.
I'm Ramprasad Kuturi, so I have a couple of points.
What is your name?
Sir, my name is Prof and I am a student in the electrical engineering.
Okay, so you know him. He's your professor.
So a couple of points. Firstly, this Nelson Mandela's question of public or private. So that seemed a little confusing for me because this election for a public purpose or a private purpose. Well, I would say it's for a private purpose because if I'm electing somebody, I'm hoping that something good will happen to me finally. So maybe everybody's private purpose eventually boils down to public purpose.
So that's the reason why I said there is a big debate and split of opinion in the country.
And secondly, those four systems that you mentioned, I think that in India's case,
there are various hybrids and
whatever they are, but just in India's case,
Hmm.
I think we have one problem, which is no matter which system we bring, ultimately we are going to invest all the power in elected representatives, and it will depend upon them whether they'll do something for us or not. To some extent, if powers can be divested to us, that is, we can have a habit of direct democracy and representative democracy. That is what would serve our purpose in the short term and the long term. In the short term, how it will serve our purpose is that to some extent we have control over our living environment.
I agree with you, so you don't have to convince me. I agree with
Yes.
you.
So we don't have any control over our own roads, our own water, our own
Absolutely.
what else? We don't have control over that. So some control has to be brought there. That is in the short term. In the long term, and that is more important. And long term is just one generation long term. So at least a part direct democracy in the one generation can actually throw fantastic leaders, because to even debate what we need in our local living environment, we would need to have a debate, a culture of debate. So children are exposed right from young age to their parents debating in a very civilized manner. All right, what is needed for our community, etc. And then children grow up seeing right now in our country, if you see news, you see how much of crosstalk happens and all that. Nobody is actually letting anybody else talk. And I actually end up changing the channels and seeing if I can find something where I can actually make sense of. But there are fantastic anchors still. But in this, where we have at least some semblance of direct democracy, children will grow up seeing how to debate. And we will have much better leaders than we have right now. So before we go for any other those systems, in some way we have to bring in some amount of direct democracy into our country. Yes, I want to be able to control my own roads.
Yeah, point well.
I want to have a voice there. I want to have a say there.
Sure. I agree with you. So I don't think we need to comment on that. Yeah. I want to give maybe somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yes.
So I'm Lieutenant Commander TPC and I'm doing the MTech in nuclear engineering. My point is that sir, we are, as you were pointing out, we have a lot of emphasis on the representatives, but we are not concentrating on the nexus of representatives, bureaucrats and the businessmen. Because that is the main thing that is creating problem for us. And that nexus has come because prior to 2005 RTA, we were not aware about the rules and regulations and anything. So, first of all, we should work towards breaking that nexus. I think without that improvement will not be possible.
Sure, I agree with you. I think you had a question.